Good evening. Hi, it's Joe. I'm just responding. This is my number 3 response. I hope it makes sense. It's going to be kind of all over the place, but as kind of was the reading. Um, so I'll say the quote first, the Dewey quote, which I really like. Every human being is an artist, a freedom being, called to participate in transforming and reshaping the conditions, thinking, and structures that shape and inform our lives. So I'm going to kind of start. I think this goes back in the Jorge interview. He mentions it, talks about some of his work, which I really liked. And I think it all kind of comes down to community engagement, the need for humans to create. But I'm going to start with, and this goes through the websites too, the social sculpture website, research unit website, the tree School for Trees website. They talk about in the websites, especially the inner and outer works. But I think I want to start in at chapter 4 of Dewey, and I think it's the term that he comes up with is impulsion. And that would be the initial stage of experiences, of art experiences. And again, it goes back to a little bit of what was mentioned in the websites about their inner works and their outer works. And the cool thing about impulsion too is that the need to move forward and outward, which is, I think, a fascinating theory. Also in chapter 4, the act of expression, Dewey talks about art in the community, how it unifies, the balance of art and nature, and nature not just being nature outside. I think it's in one of the later chapters, but it talks about of human nature, and getting back to the quote there too of Dewey's. Also, he talks about in chapter 4 aesthetic emotion and how that is a very natural thing, which is also natural emotion. And also, I really like the quote that without emotion, there can be no art, which I've thought about before, which can get kind of sappy sometimes, but he's right in the terms of what we as humans deal with. I really like the Jorge interview. I'm going to get back to the readings in a minute. But again, I liked his going back to, again, this whole outsider-insider thing. That is the inner and outer works, but the fact that he's an immigrant. He's an outsider that can view our society, but also is an insider. I liked his progression from visual artist to performance artist to community and participatory art. The projects at East High, which I saw, which I thought was really cool. I really thought was great. Also, the Hands Up, Don't Shoot piece I found really inspiring as well. I thought his advice was great. To be thoughtful, know your history. His idea of like, don't go into empowerment, don't go into empower. They already have power, but find out what those assets are of those communities and use those, which also goes back to the whole reading. I think basically, I could sum up the reading. I think it's man's desire, and these are all the chapters. I will go into a little bit more detail, but it's man's need to create and connect with himself, with ourselves, with the community at large, and the need to create. He talks about the different chapters about having experienced. Chapter 3. The quote about the birds, I think summing that up is, I forgot which quote it was. The birds going from flight to, oh yeah, here it is. William James aptly compared the course of conscious experience to the alternate flights and perchings of a bird, which he goes on to talk about that, how it goes from um, the collective group or birds going from a spot of resting to then going on flying movement outward and forward to another perch, and that the artistic experience is like that, and I found that really fascinating. Um, Again, chapter one, um, going back to that, going back to environment, community, your surroundings, nature, and man interacting. Nature not necessarily being nature that's outside, trees and things like that, but what is human nature. Um, I thought it was interesting in chapter three how they talked about how the artist and with the having an experience talk about ingesting and digesting at the same time, as well as creating at the same time. Um, and also this term of undergoing. And he brings up this of a phrase of doing and undergoing, outgoing, and incoming energy, that the artist has to do all these things at the same time. I kind of went over chapter four, mainly focusing on the community, again, art and nature, art and nature. Um, and again, that idea of impulsion, which I think is the basis of all this reading, is that that's the initial stage of that experience. Chapter six, getting into substance and form, or I should say matter and form, because he kind of throws substance out the window and changes it to matter, which I thought was interesting because I talk about a lot about form and function, whether a chair is effective or ineffective. It doesn't fall apart when you sit on it, so it's effective. What else? What else? What else? Also, the talk about. I thought it was interesting in chapter six when we talk about the enemies of form and matter. That the enemies of form and matter come from us. That their fear and apathy, and that they don't come from an outside source, but they come from within us, which I thought was fascinating. Um, um, Chapter 14, the ending, the last chapter that we read, um, it gets into morals, art and morals, and how without art, the morals, the conflict that goes on there. The quote on page 360, I think, that was really fascinating. A change in the climate of the change in the climate of the imagination is a precursor to the changes that affect more than the details of life, which also I think is at the basis of all this reading, is that the imagination, that we as a species have an imagination and we act on it and we create things. And again, one of the things in chapter 14, like the aesthetic experience of being human, the aesthetic experience, and nobody else does that but us, which I think is kind of cool. Also going back to the human connection. What else? It all kind of, yeah, it all, the reading, Dewey's, the read, he's kind of all over the place, but, or in terms of read, he's not an easy read. The chapters are not easy reads, but once you kind of whittle it down and think, it makes a lot of sense. And then going to the websites, I thought was interesting, how socially they're really trying, mainly in the thought. I mean, I was looking for artworks and saw a few things, but I really like their ideas of change, of changing mindsets, which is pretty amazing. Anyway, I hope that makes sense. Beth, thank you very much for your comments. I tried to email you back about coming to the Wednesday thing. I had a Footloose rehearsal, and then I emailed you back, but I couldn't respond, so I've been pretty busy. But I hope you're well, and I'm going to try to be here this Wednesday. Take care. Thank you. Good night.